Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Welcome to the last video in my series, Languages for Islamic Studies book lists. The languages which we'll be talking about today are Hebrew and Syriac. Now you might say, well, what do they really have to do with Islamic studies? And I would say, well, they are important if you have an interest in a deeper understanding of Semitic languages. And of course, the main language for Islamic studies is Arabic. And if you really want to acquire a deeper appreciation for Arabic, you have to study other Semitic languages to see how they are related. A Semitic languages refers to a large language family, of which the larger super family is nowadays called Afro-Asiatic. And so this includes Arabic, Hebrew, it includes the different forms of Aramaic, including Syriac. Syriac, strictly speaking, is a kind of Aramaic. Classical Ethiopic, also known as Ge'ez. Epigraphic South Arabian, Akkadian. Akkadian, sometimes also referred to as Assyrian and Babylonian, but let's not get into all of these niceties. But these are the main, most famous Semitic languages. Also, especially if you're interested in the modern Middle East, obviously a knowledge of Hebrew will help you. There is also a lot of research which is done, surprisingly, maybe you might find it surprising, on Islamic studies in the Hebrew language. So if you know modern Hebrew, a lot of that would be accessible, although most of that is also available in English, but not always. Just as we have with Arabic, we have the classical language and later versions, more modern versions of the language. So also with Hebrew, you've got biblical Hebrew, and then you have so-called rabbinical Hebrew or Mishnaic Hebrew, and then modern Israeli Hebrew. So if you really want to start with biblical Hebrew or classical Hebrew, then the best book for this, it's an old book, but I still think it's the best book. It's by J. Weingreen. It's called A Practical Grammar of Classical Hebrew. A Practical Grammar for Classical Hebrew. This is a fantastic book for self-study, very accessible, and there have been many, many other books written since for biblical or classical Hebrew, but really this, I think, is probably the best that's ever been done. He has another book called Classical Hebrew Composition. When you're learning a language, it's one thing to be able to translate from that language into your language, say English, Arabic to English, Hebrew to English, Persian to English, Turkish to English, and so forth. It's quite another to be able to go from English into, say, Hebrew or Arabic or what have you. And so this book is very good for that. If you just want to jump in with the modern, the best book really is this Yesod. Yesod means foundation, or the English subtitle is Fundamentals of Hebrew by Luba Uweiler and Norman Broznik. This has gone through several editions. I think this is the 8th edition. This is the one they actually used at Princeton University when I was a student there. I wouldn't be surprised if they still do. It's published by Feldheim Publishers. There are a lot of dictionaries for Hebrew. There's the famous Ben Yehuda dictionary, which Eliezer Ben Yehuda dictionary, which has gone through many, many, many editions. For Hebrew, there's the Even Shoshan dictionary. There's also different editions and versions of that. But for biblical Hebrew, the standard book is a Hebrew and English lexicon of the Old Testament by William Gesenius. And it was subsequently added to and revived by others. And so it's known as the Brown, Driver, Briggs, Gesenius, because these were the names of the other people who contributed to it after Gesenius, namely Francis Brown, E.R. Driver, and C.A. Briggs. And then there's also Edward Robinson, because it was actually written in German, and then it was put into English. This is very useful because it also gives every occurrence of a given word in the Old Testament. Now, if you want to have a kind of word index or a concordance to the Old Testament, this will actually serve for that as well. But if you want a standalone concordance, there's the Hebrew Concordancia Hadasha by Even Shoshan, which is also available in various editions. And as I said, Hebrew has gone through different phases of development. There's different kinds of Hebrew. And for this, excellent overview is provided by History of the Hebrew Language by Ángel Sáenz Badillos, translated from Spanish by John Elwold, And this is a Cambridge University Press, so it's an expensive book, but it's very, very useful. Now, if you want to get a nice introduction and overview of the Semitic languages, you can't do better than this classic text by Gotthelf Bergstrasse. I think the original version was written in 1921 in German. It's never been surpassed and probably never will be. The Introduction to the Semitic Languages, fantastic book. And it has really great examples for all the key Semitic languages. And there's even representations of the modern sort of dialects. For example, for Arabic, he gives examples of Central Arabian Bedouin dialect, Egyptian, Moroccan, and even Maltese. We spoke about Maltese in the first video. So this is a fantastic book. Fantastic, really. I can't recommend it more. And I also mentioned Syriac. Syriac is quite interesting for Islamic studies because you can find historical sources contemporaneous with or very close to the early days of the emergence of Islam. And it became kind of a big deal, especially with the researches of Michael Cook and Patricia Crone, famous book called Hagerism. That's its whole other story, but the story has continued since then. And there was a guy named Robert Hoyland that brought out a book which was called Islam as Others Saw It, or Islam Through Others' Eyes, or something of that effect. And it came out, it was Darwin Press, New Jersey, and then it went out of print. It was a very expensive book then. It's even more expensive now. It's been reprinted by the Gorgias Press. And if you want kind of an overview of all these researches and that deals with some of the Syriac materials, there's this fantastic book. A very interesting book. I don't agree with everything here, certainly not, but this is an interesting work. It's called Muhammad and the Empires of Faith, The Making of the Prophet of Islam by Sean W. Anthony. So Syriac is an important language for these kinds of researches to access these early Syriac sources. And once again here, I can't recommend anything better than Wheeler M. Thaxton, once again, the indefatigable Professor Thaxton and his Introduction to Syriac. This, again, is a fantastic standalone book because there's plenty of examples of readings, not only from the Bible, which is important. Syriac is very much a Christian language, but other texts. There's a very ample selection of readings in this. And, of course, you will need a dictionary. So there is the Compendious Syriac Dictionary by Payne Smith. Actually, it's edited by J. Payne Smith, who was his daughter. It's actually based on a Syriac Latin lexicon, which he wrote, which is called the Thesaurus Syriacus. But this is available. It's published by Eisenbrauns, just like the Bergstrasser Introduction to Semitic Languages, also published by Eisenbrauns. And then if you want a reference grammar, there's the Compendious Syriac Grammar by Nöldecke. This is not a friendly book, but it is, I think, the only reference grammar that's out there. So Syriac is also important. If you know Arabic, and if you've learned Arabic well, learning Hebrew and Syriac is a joke. It's so easy. You just have to learn the writing systems, and after that, it's all just downhill. It's a very, very accessible language, and it's very useful because you will understand a lot about roots, the root system. Even in Arabic, you will find a lot of cognates, a lot of words which are there in Hebrew and Syriac, which are pronounced slightly differently. Certain consonants have shifted, but you find cognates of them in Arabic as well. And again, if you know Arabic very well, then really the best way to learn Hebrew is to use this book, Durus اللغة العبرية by Professor Ribhi Kamal. This is Dar al-Ilm lil-Malayin, Beirut. This is a fantastic standalone book. It's got all the verb tables, everything you need to learn Hebrew, and a comprehensive grammar in Arabic. But that's, again, if you know Arabic. So these are my suggestions for Hebrew and Syriac. I wish everyone the best of luck, every success in learning these languages. Thank you so much for watching.